If Netflix and Knit is anything like Netflix and chill, you're all about to get real lucky. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Gamercrafting podcast. I had about 4 false starts on recording that intro, so I don't really know what's going on today. Today's podcast, vlog, whatever this is going to be talking about my favorite things to watch and or listen to when I am knitting or crocheting. I don't want to leave crochet out because I do that too, as do many of us. So I had a few questions on Instagram this past week or two asking me my recommendations for things to watch on Netflix or audiobooks to listen to. So I thought I would compile it into a podcast for you and I will explain what each little thing is about. So I'm going to start off with things on Netflix. I've tried to pick Netflix originals, so things that will not get like cycled off the platform. So hopefully if you're watching this in 6 or 8 months, these things are still available on Netflix. Also, there shouldn't be any region difficulties with Netflix originals like there can be with some of the other stuff as well. So I've tried to stick to Netflix originals. This is by far not an exhaustive list of everything that I have enjoyed on Netflix, but I have tried to avoid things that can be particularly triggering or troubling. I've tried to leave out the stuff with a particularly violent, gory, upsetting content. There are a few things in the list, but I'll try to let you know what kind of stuff is in there in this podcast. So I'm going to start off with fiction. So fiction stuff that I've really enjoyed on Netflix. I have like a whole little list right here. These aren't in any particular order. I just kind of scribbled down a list of stuff that I have watched probably within the last year or so, stuff that I have enjoyed on Netflix. So like I said, this list isn't in any order. This isn't, a BuzzFeed countdown. So first up, I have Umbrella Academy, which is a relatively recent release. There's only one season up on Netflix. It's about sort of a family of superheroes that grow up and they become estranged and they all end up having to kind of reunite for their eccentric father's memorial and funeral and that. I didn't think I was going to like it, and then I saw Ellen Page was in it, so I thought, well, I'll watch it because I have a lot of love in my heart for for Ellen Page. So we watched it, and I really didn't think Sara was gonna like it because she's a big she hates kind of like Deus Ex Machina in fiction. The part in Lord of the Rings where the eagles save them. She's always like, why can't they just fly them all the way there? Which we all know the real answer for that. But anyway, so Umbrella Academy it was really good. There is a fair bit of sort of violence in it. I don't know, none of the main characters fight it. That's not really a spoiler. I'm trying to like inform you of what it's about without being spoilery. Anyway, Umbrella Academy is good if you like superhero stuff. That's kind of where I'm at with it. If you like the Marvel stuff, if you like DC, if you like comics, superheroes, that kind of thing, you will probably like Umbrella Academy. It is pretty good. I enjoyed it. Next on the list, I have both the Jessica Jones and the Luke Cage shows on Netflix. I've included them kind of together because there's a fair bit of crossover between the two. Well, maybe not so much with Jessica Jones into Luke Cage, but he shows up in Jessica Jones a fair bit. I know that they've been canceled now. It's because Disney has bought Marvel and they're probably going to put it on their streaming platform because what's the point of... The reason that Netflix became so popular in the first place is because everyone got sick and tired of paying loads and loads and loads of money for cable bills, except now everything is getting kind of parted out and put onto different platforms, which is mega frustrating. And everyone ends up subscribed to a bunch of different platforms, and you end up spending kind of the same as you were for cable in the first place. Because, you have Netflix now, which is what this one is, but then there's Now TV, and there's there's Hulu in America, and there's Netflix, yeah, I said that, and Amazon Prime, and now there's going to be a Disney specific streaming platform. Where will the madness end? Anyway, so I've still included Jessica Jones and Luke Cage because I still think that they're good shows. They're still entertaining. I can definitely rewatch them without feeling bored. And David Tennant as a baddie is just unsettling. They do go into a bit about kind of PTSD, and I think that they show that really well with Jessica Jones, actually. They show PTSD pretty well, and sort of the grounding and coping mechanisms that you have to use when you have PTSD or panic attacks, anxiety, that kind of thing. So Jessica Jones and Luke Cage both are very good shows. I know Luke Cage got a lot of hate when it came out, but I'm gonna say I feel like it's probably the same sort of thing that happens whenever a movie with loads of women comes out, and then all the sort of toxic fanboys are like, oh no, it's not because she's a woman, or it's not because it's a mostly black cast, it's just because it wasn't good. And you think, well, you're probably not really unpacking your own unconscious bias there, buddy. Or you have unpacked it and you're just not going to say it publicly because you know that it's socially unacceptable to be racist or sexist. Well, that's debatable, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I really liked Luke Cage regardless of the hate that I got. Jessica Jones, I think, was actually very good. I really liked them both. I will say though, Iron Fist, no, don't bother. Don't bother with Iron Fist. I'm sure there's probably going to be at least one person who comments and says that they loved Iron Fist. I watched it and it made me I just spent the whole time, the entire season, in like a permanent cringe face. Just no. I mean, there's a lot wrong with the Iron Fist story. Anyway, that it's a skinny white boy who ends up in some rural hidden shrine area, and it's like, oh, suddenly he's better at all of this mystical cultural stuff than the native people were, which is always kind of a problematic storyline, and it's just no. So no, Iron Fist, it's not great. I mean, even regardless of the super cringe storyline, it's just the pacing is bad. I know a lot of people who really like Daredevil as well. I didn't like Daredevil. I'm sorry. I tried on 4 different occasions to get into Daredevil, and I just couldn't do it. I would watch about 3 episodes, and I would just notice that I was just scrolling on my phone. You know, I'm totally not paying attention. I'm not even knitting at this point. I'm just doing anything to distract me from a show that I'm just super mega not into. So, apologies if you love Daredevil and it's your super favorite on Netflix. I tried. I did try. I gave it a fair chance as well. I didn't just try once. I tried multiple times. All right, so next up on the list, moving away from the massive digression about Marvel, is Russian Doll, which is also a relatively recent release on Netflix. There is a bit of sexual content. There is a fair bit of it's not super gory, but it does deal a lot with, there's like a lot of sort of death and stuff in it. So if that upsets you, then maybe give it an avoid. But it's kind of like a groundhog. What is wrong with me? It is kind of a Groundhog Day kind of central theme. And it's with Natasha Lyonne, who I love, who has the best hair I've ever seen. Maybe not that I've ever seen, but she has excellent hair. So Russian Doll was really good. I think we kind of blasted through Russian Doll in, I don't know, an evening, like a long evening, staying up a bit too late maybe. So that might be good for, a weekend. Next up on the list, I have The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. It is really it's dark, it's sort of goth and creepy, and it kind of subverts all of the cutesy 90s after school special stuff of Sabrina that was on television in the early 2000s. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I thought was really good. I thought it was well handled. Obviously, it definitely have its criticisms. If you're somebody who doesn't like this sort of black magic witch stuff, don't watch it. You're gonna probably hate it. But if you're somebody who thinks that stuff is cool, or you like the narrative behind it, then yeah. But yeah, like I said, it is pretty dark, so it's probably not something light and fluffy. Depending on who you are, I feel like it's quite a light and fluffy watch because none of it really affected me on a personal level. I will say at this point, I meant to say this at the beginning, all of this stuff is like none of it's perfect, right? There's no such thing as perfect media. We can do our best to support media that is inclusive and is not damaging and doesn't perpetuate racist, sexist, misogynist stereotypes. But it's okay to like things while recognizing that they have problems with the narrative, with the casting. It's just being critical of the media that you love. I'm even wearing a shirt. This is be critical of media that you love, but you can't see it because I'm wearing overalls. So like I said, obviously none of this stuff is going to be perfect. We all have to be better about trying to support creative endeavors that are doing things well. So, but I mean, you know, no one's gonna skewer you for enjoying something that maybe has a couple of throwaway lines in it that aren't super progressive or great. That's especially true for stuff that's a bit older. I know most of the stuff that I've named so far has been pretty recent. But that especially goes for stuff from, you know, the 90s and earlier when things get said that wouldn't be acceptable now. Anyway, so SABRINA, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I thought was quite good. I watched it around Halloween when it actually initially launched. And I feel like that's a good time to watch it. It kind of gets you feeling spooky. But you can watch it any time of year, of course. There was also, they also did a Christmas special, which was really funny, that I enjoyed. Again, I found it funny because it's kind of subverting the sort of normal stuff that happened on SABRINA in the early 2000s. Next on the list is Star Trek Discovery. I know this has received a lot of hate from Star Trek hardcore fans. Again, I feel like this is one of those things where people maybe don't super love that the leads aren't white guys. The same reason that Voyager got a lot of hate and everyone just swears no, it's just because of the narrative, which, well, maybe, but Voyager's my favorite, so they can all get out. Star Trek Discovery, I was actually the first Star Trek that I ever watched. I know, please don't remove my geek cred card. Star Trek Discovery was the first thing we ever watched, and it was because we had a bunch of people telling us that it was great, and the lead was great, and the main character, Michael Burnham, was great. I also have a yarn called Michael Burnham. So that was the first Star Trek we ever watched. So you can watch it without ever having watched Star Trek. It gives you enough of background for you to ease into it. This is one that's, I think it's released week on week on Netflix. So I don't think this is one that just gets season dumped. But yeah, Star Trek Discovery, I really enjoyed the first season, and then we went and binged a whole bunch of Star Trek, so I'm all up on it now, don't worry. And now season 2 started a few weeks ago. We haven't watched any of season 2 as of yet, but I really enjoy Star Trek Discovery. So even if you've not watched Star Trek before, like, give it a shot. You might like it more than the earlier Star Trek stuff. Obviously, a lot of the lore is the same. Tonally, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more movie production looking rather than TV production looking, if that makes sense, because, well, I suppose that's happening really across a lot of big franchises. I mean, look at Game of Thrones. Like, what is their budget per show? Like $7 million or something just mad like that. So Star Trek Discovery, that's good. Even if you've not watched Star Trek before, you can totally get into it with that. Next on my list, I have Orphan Black, which I think was a CBC original because it's filmed in Toronto. And I started watching Orphan Black a bunch of years ago. maybe just after the first season ended, maybe. I watched all of the season of season 1, and then it was another thing that I didn't think that Sara was going to be into, so I was watching it on my own, and then she watched a few episodes, and then we ended up finishing up the series together. Tatiana Maslany, who plays the main character, is amazing. Like, I can't even believe the amount of acting chops you'd have to pull off this show. It's amazing. It's very sci-fi. It's about sort of sci-fi and clones and conspiracy theories and all this kind of thing. So if you're into if you're into that kind of thing, definitely give it a go. It's, I don't know, I found it, I enjoyed it. So, that's all I can say is if you need, I think there's 4 or 5 seasons. It's done now. So you could just go and binge the entirety of Orphan Black and not have to worry about waiting for the next season. Oh man. All right. Next on my list is The Good Place. This is another one that drops episode week by week rather than a season dump. This also might be one, I don't know if The Good Place is available on Netflix in the US. I don't know. Drop me a comment. But it's definitely available over here in the UK. The Good Place is, I think it's really funny and well done, and it's kind of a lesson in ethics every episode, and it addresses a lot of things, and it is kind of a feel good. I think it's a feel good show. It's funny, it's pretty lighthearted. It's, if I was going to compare it maybe tonally to something, I might say Parks and Rec, not subject matter, but just kind of the sort of lighthearted tone of it, with people being problematic, but there's still people building relationships and so on and so forth. Anyway, Good Place, it's good. Next on my list is Fargo. So not the movie, but the show. There's 3 seasons, I think, or 2. I don't know how many seasons there are now. I definitely watched and enjoyed the first season, which was with Martin Freeman. And I watched the second series and I liked it, but not as much. And I don't think I've seen anything past that. Obviously, it's Fargo, so there's gonna be a lot of sort of violence and not happy content. So so there's your fair warning. Obviously, if you've seen the original film Fargo that came out in 90 something, then you'll know kind of tonally what it's going to be all about, and it follows along those lines pretty closely with regards to sort of interwoven tales. It's very Coen Brothers. If you're familiar with the Coen Brothers, then the show follows along the movie's footsteps pretty closely. Next on my list, I have Glow, which is another Netflix original. It's called, so Glow is short for Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and sort of takes place back in the 80s, and I enjoy it. Obviously, this is one of those shows where I enjoy it, and it has elements of sort of girl power and feminism, but also some stuff that you're maybe like, I don't know about that. But anyway, I really enjoy Glow. I think that it's another pretty positive, putting your friends first kind of underlying sentiment. I enjoy it. It's a good thing to watch if you just need a little bit of escapism, maybe. Okay, right. Next up, I'm sorry, I know that this is a long list. Next up on my list is Stranger Things. Stranger Things, most people probably know about Stranger Things by now. It's very 80s nostalgia, it's very sci-fi. It's kind of tapped into the whole, everything seems to be a reboot now, or kind of revised versions of stuff that we all loved in the 80s. Stranger Things definitely taps into that. It's an original series, but the aesthetic of it, and yeah, it just really taps into that sort of 80s nostalgia. And it's still very sci-fi, it's very monster oriented. The cast of kids is phenomenal, which, whenever you're seeing something with kids in it, you're always like, But this cast of kids is obviously great. So, Stranger Things, I think there's 3 seasons? No, 2. I don't know. An amount of seasons. However many there are, I know I've seen it all. How about that? So, okay, yeah, so that's number 11. The next thing I have on the list is Black Mirror, with some caveats. So I really enjoy Black Mirror. Each episode is its own sort of little vignette. They're not necessarily... There's a few of them that are hinted that they're in the same universe, but they're each their own story vignette. You don't need to watch all of them to understand. In fact, I would recommend that you don't watch all of them. The first episode of Black Mirror I ever saw was the very first season 1, episode 1, and I almost didn't watch anymore. That's how much I found it really just gross and upsetting, and I feel like it didn't really... There was no sort of lesson to be learned from it. It was just kind of which, if you know the episode I'm talking about, you'll know why I was like, I don't think I want to watch any more of this. But I skipped ahead, and so I'm going to tell you about the 4 episodes that Sara and I enjoy the most. So our combined favorite is San Junipero, which is... I think that it addresses a lot of things really well. It addresses... it's one of the only shows that I can think of that addresses bisexuality in a positive way that isn't... It's not challenged. It's not any sort of, pick a side or diminishing of bisexuality. It's you know, it's a woman basically saying, I like men and women, and that's, like, you know, that's that, basically. So it's one of the only shows, like I said, it's one of the only shows that I think describes or portrays bisexuality in just a really positive way with no caveats. And that one's a really positive, feel good episode that I really enjoy. A lot of the other ones are a bit like, ooh, but this one's really positive and feel good, and I really enjoy it. I did some fan art for San Junipero last summer. I don't know where it is though, so you can't see it. The next one is from the most recent series, and it's one of Sarah's favorites. It's called USS Callister, and it's kind of like, if you were gonna watch it, you'd think, oh, this looks like really early Star Trek, but there's anyway, it kind of goes into the ethics, a lot of sort of artificial intelligence and that kind of thing. But I really enjoyed USS Callister, and that's one of Sarah's favorites. The next one is one of probably one of both of our favorites, I would say. And it's called Nosedive, and that really kind of digs into not just the ethics, but like the socialization of social media and kind of likes and ratings and this kind of thing. It takes it to an extreme, of course, but I think it definitely, every time I watch it, I think maybe I should put my phone down for a little while and sort of try and focus a bit more on not real life, because I don't want to say that social media is not real life, because of course it is. It's an integral part of most of our existences. I'm posting this on sort of a social media platform. I'm going to advertise it on social media platforms. I'm not saying that it's not real. I'm just saying that particular episode really makes you think a lot about kind of rating culture and being obsessed with the amount of likes that you get, likes and comments. Definitely like and comment on this video though. And getting too wound up in what the algorithm says about us and this kind of thing. That's kind of more what I'm saying. So Nosedive is also a really good episode of Black Mirror. And then the last one I have on my list for Black Mirror is called Be Right Back, which deals a lot with grief. And so if you've recently, or not even recently, if you've lost a partner at any point in life and you feel like that might be upsetting, maybe don't watch that one because it might be a bit upsetting for you. So those are the 4 favorite Black Mirror episodes. There's other ones that I do really like. Is there one called Black Museum? Because I liked that one, but I don't think Sarah liked that one as much. There's a lot of other episodes that are quite good, but those are definitely the sort of top 4. If you disagree with me, let me know what your favorite is. So that was the last thing on my list for like fiction things to watch on Netflix. I also have a few documentaries listed on here. Admittedly, I don't have loads listed on here because while I've watched lots of documentaries on Netflix, a lot of them were not Netflix originals, so I don't know if they're going to be available in other regions. I don't know if they're going to be available tomorrow. So I've listed just the ones that I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get a hold of at any point. So the first thing I have on my list is Planet Earth Part 2. Obviously, if you live here in the UK, you're probably familiar with Planet Earth Part 1, which is narrated by David Attenborough, and it was a visually stunning documentary that, I don't know, it was beautiful, really. That's just the only way to go about it. The cinematography was beautiful, and the narration was very educational. And so Part 2 is on Netflix, and I'm pretty sure that's a Netflix-directed thing. I hope so. Part 2 is just as good as Part 1, so if you enjoyed Planet Earth Part 1, then you will definitely enjoy Part 2. It's still narrated by David Attenborough, and it's a really good thing to have on. I mean, I'll admit, if you're looking at your knitting, you might it might not be great, because you're going to want to look at the television screen to see all of the really beautiful camera shots in that. But if you're knitting something easy and you don't need to look at it, then it's a good choice. It's pretty calming to listen to, even regardless, though. So the second thing I have on my list is BLACKFISH, which I realize is a few years old now because it has already sparked loads of debate around the ethics of having orca whales and dolphins and these kind of super intelligent marine life in aquariums to do, doing tricks and doing shows and this and that. And a lot of places have changed their changed their operating procedures because of it, because there was such a huge public outcry. There's been laws that have been made in Canada for sure, and I think also in California, based on what people are and aren't allowed to do with regards to conservation efforts and bringing these animals into a park. Most places, the laws that have come in say that people can't make them do shows anymore, because it's not good for them, and it's not good for their mental health, and it's not good for the species, many of them which are endangered anyway. So Blackfish is on there because it's a really good intro into why that stuff then happened. We've also watched a few episodes of a show called Trigger Warning with Killer Mike. I've only watched a few episodes, so I can't comment on the whole thing, but in the first episode, I don't remember, it was either episode 1 or 2, I think I've only seen the first couple episodes so far, but he's talking about systemic racism in schools and how it affects kids, and he's absolutely no nonsense. He pulls no punches. He's not trying to be polite or nice. He's just like, this is what's happening. This is a US based sort of sociological documentary, but in no way does that mean that these issues are only in the US. He talks a lot about the school to prison pipeline in the US with the issues with the private prisons in the United States, which I don't know how true that is here in the UK, I'll be honest. I'm a bit ignorant about that. But anyway, so he pulls no punches, so I can't comment on the rest of the episodes because I've not seen them. So if you've seen the later episode that's especially upsetting, then I have not seen that. I've only seen the first couple, but it seems like an interesting show that I'll probably watch a bit more of. And then the last thing I have on my list for Netflix documentaries is Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. I have watched this show probably half a dozen times. There's, I think, there's 4 episodes. There's an episode for salt, episode for fat, acid, heat, so on and so forth. And the host, Salman Nosrat, she's amazing. Her genuine, love for food and culinary arts is absolutely infectious. I adore it. And the way that she talks about food, and, I feel like so many cooking and food-based shows nowadays are very calories and macros and this kind of thing, and it can be really upsetting for somebody who's got a history of eating disorders or of disordered eating or whatever have you, which is the same for me as well. So I really enjoyed having a show that I could watch about food, that it was just genuine love for food and talking about different methods, and I learned so much, and I've become way more adventurous in the kitchen making things and thinking more critically about how you prepare something and how the best way to prepare something will be. I know I'm talking a lot about this, but let me tell you, I absolutely loved it. There are a couple episodes that have subtitles, because Just Travel, I think all of them but one have subtitles actually. So if you are working on a complicated project, probably not the best for that. But if you are working on a project that you don't need to look at it very much, it's a really good option for that. I knit through most of the foot of some socks while I was watching it once because I watched it 6-7 times. The first episode is Fat, and she goes to northern Italy and sees these farms where they raise animals ethically, and it's all about sustainable production and sustainable, it's just so good. It's so good. And she goes to Japan because there's hundreds of different kinds of salt, which is a thing that I didn't know. I know that now, didn't know it then. Hundreds of different kinds of salt, and there's so much salt production in Japan, which I also didn't know. And it's just, so interesting. And then Acid, she goes to Mexico and talks a lot about how they use citrus in the way that they marinate their food. Specifically, I think they do turkey in that episode. And then heat, I don't know. When I first heard Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, I had assumed that heat was going to be taste heat, spiciness. But it wasn't. It was actually about the actual cooking of something and how much that plays a role as well. And it is so positive, and she is so lovely and genuine that it just fills my heart with joy, and I cry happy tears every time I watch Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. So I don't know, that's a pretty rousing endorsement, but I love it, so definitely go watch it. There are obviously loads of other documentaries that I've watched. Like I said, I don't think any of those are Netflix originals. But if you are curious, the Ken Burns documentary about Prohibition is really good. It is US based, so it might be a little bit more difficult to get a hold of here in the UK most of the time. But there was loads that I didn't know about Prohibition and how it came to be, and it was really informative. And he also has one on the Civil War, obviously again US based. That was really interesting, talking about the complexities of the Civil War. Those are just two I can think of off the top of my head. Not obviously, but I have watched like loads of documentaries. There's also one called Yellowstone. I don't know who that's narrated by, but it's fantastic and the cinematography is really good. It's kind of Planet Earth-y in tone and feel, but specifically about Yellowstone National Park in the US. Okay, so I've kind of gone through everything watching-wise on Netflix. I'm going to talk a bit about audiobooks because I have recently discovered the beauty of audiobooks. For a long time, I don't know, obviously audiobooks has been around for ages. I remember when I was a kid, sometimes my mom would check them out from the library and that on cassette tapes. So I'm going to talk about the ones that I have personally listened to on audiobook, so I can vouch for how good the performance is and the reading, because sometimes you'll have a book it's a good book, but the reading maybe, I don't know, it just doesn't ping you the right way or whatever. So these are ones that I can personally vouch for. So most recently I finished, these are all ones I've finished in the last couple of months. So Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. I read it because somebody said, if you really like sci-fi, then you should definitely read Octavia Butler if you never had. And I had read one of her books. I'd read Fledgling a couple years ago, which I really enjoyed. So I thought it came up on my Audible app as a suggestion, Parable of the Talents, and I thought, yeah, so I listened to it, loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was super immersive. The reading of it was really immersive, and then realized when it was done that it's apparently part of a series, which I didn't realize beforehand, so I'm going to have to go back and listen to Parable of the Sower, which is also part of it, and I think there's another one that I'm forgetting. But those are really good. It kind of talks, it's a little bit unnerving because this was published initially, I think, in 88 or 89, and she talks about a political candidate whose main thing is saying "Make America Great Again," and the rise of kind of, super religious, and then how it ends up being quite exclusionary and racist, and there's fires that have displaced people and all this. So it's like, it's a bit too on the nose for our current time, but it was a very good book, and I found it very interesting. And the protagonist in the book, I like when we have a protagonist that we love because they're the protagonist, but they're not perfect. They've got problems, or maybe they don't make the right decisions all the time, and that's definitely the case for Parable of the Talents. Next I have on my list is a book that I just finished a few days ago called Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. And it was a suggestion that I'd seen on a friend of mine's Facebook. I think she linked to it on Facebook. She's a librarian, and if you're watching this, hi, Erin. She's a librarian, and she had it listed as a good audiobook. And so I immediately went and got it because, she's a librarian, she knows things. And it's not a very long audiobook. I think it was only maybe 4 hours, which isn't that long for an audiobook. So I really enjoyed it. The main character it definitely didn't go in a direction I thought it was going to go. It really surprised me after having read the little blurb. So the main character, she's from a very reclusive. She's from a very reclusive tribe, but they're really well known for making the best. She calls them astrolabes. So it's very sort of futuristic, and she's the first person from her tribe to be chosen to go to this really exciting science university, but it's like a space university in space. And so it kind of it's a really interesting intersection of not just sort of futuristic aliens and that kind of thing, but also like deep-rooted cultural tradition. It is really good. It does it so well, and I really enjoyed it. And that's another one that I learned after I finished it, that it's apparently part of a series, but for some reason the other ones aren't available as an audiobook for whatever reason. So it said it was due to licensing. I don't know. So I'm gonna have to go and buy the actual paperbacks to finish the series, which I will because I really enjoyed it. Next on my list, I have what I'm currently listening to. It's called Becoming, and it's by Michelle Obama. It's also narrated by her because she's obviously a fabulous orator. Well, she probably had lots of training being the first lady of the US for 8 years. It's much more visceral than I had anticipated. The way that she describes growing up on the south side of Chicago and sort of those sticky summer nights that you get in Chicago, which I'm real familiar with having grown up there. It's so good. I have the hardback version that was given to me for Christmas, but I have been so busy lately. I feel like sitting down to do anything other than work, basically, is time that I can't afford. So I just went ahead and I got the audiobook on Audible, and I'm listening to it, and it is phenomenal. I'm about an hour and a half in. I don't know how much left I have to go, but I'm really enjoying it. Next I have on my list, what does that even say? Oh, well. Next I have on my list is the very first audiobook that I listened to a few months ago now, and it's called Fight Like a Girl, and that's by Clementine Ford. I also follow her on Twitter. Fight Like a Girl really kind of hit me pretty hard. It talks a lot about the kind of things that we internalize when you're growing up as a young girl, the things that we internalize about gender and about what's expected of us as young women, as ladies, as girls, you know. And the thing that hit me especially hard was when she was talking about growing up as a chubby girl who endured a lot of bullying and a lot of teasing and fat shaming, and the way that she explains kind of having to deal with that as she grew into adulthood was something that hit me like a ton of bricks, let me tell you. It was, I mean, I remember I just had to pause it and I just like sat there and I just had to really process for a good 20 minutes and I just really heavily related it to my own experiences growing up. And it also kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things that you don't think about when you're growing up, things that people say or do that do reinforce quite a rigid gender binary that you don't really begin to unpack until you're a bit older and you have a bit more distance. It's really a fantastic thing to either read or listen to. So the next things that I have on my list are books that I have read and books that I know are available as audiobooks, but I have not personally listened to the audiobooks, so I cannot personally vouch for the quality of the audiobooks themselves, but I mean, they're all pretty big books, so I'm sure it's good, but I'm just saying I've not personally listened to them as an audiobook. I read these as paper copies. The first thing I have on my list is the Maddadam Trilogy by Margaret Atwood. Obviously, many of you will know who Margaret Atwood is because she wrote The Handmaid's Tale, which is now a TV series, and many of us read it in school. But this trilogy, it's interesting in that the main character is a man. It talks a lot about sort of gene sequencing, and it's very futuristic and sort of sci-fi. Obviously dystopian, because that's kind of her thing. I personally love a dystopian novel, but it's probably because we're living in one. So the Maddadam Trilogy is very good, available as an audiobook. The next thing I have on my list, sorry, my paper's curling. The next thing I have on my list is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, and that's by Reni Eddo-Lodge. That was another one that I've read as a paper copy, but I've not listened to the audiobook of it, but it is available as an audiobook. It's something that really helps you kind of begin to unpack your own underlying racism. I know that's a thing that a lot of people don't want to say. A lot of people feel uncomfortable saying racism. And, I mean, honestly, if people were as uncomfortable seeing racism as they were saying it, we'd probably be in a better standing in society. Let's just be clear. I don't mean a better standing, you know, I mean society would be in a better standing. And it's, I don't know, I'm just going to tell you just to go and read it, because if I start talking about all the things that I took away from it, we'll be here for another 4 hours. So it's definitely a book that's worth reading, especially if you've been thinking a lot about conversations that have been happening on Instagram lately with regards to inclusion and diversity and racism. It's a good book to read if you really want to, if you want to change how you think and you want to really educate yourself without demanding emotional labor from other people, emotional or academic labor, then it's a good place to start. So I'm going to move on. What next do I have on my list? I have Women and Power by Mary Beard. I actually saw the lecture that she gave that I don't know if it inspired the book, if she was already working on the book, but it was like a good 6 months before the book came out. And it was at the British Museum in London, and I bought tickets, and my wife and I went, and it was a fantastic talk. It is so interesting to hear how narratives around women who are powerful have been shaped throughout history, and how even a long-ass time ago, it was kind of defaulting to this, if a woman is powerful, then she's gonna turn you to stone, or she's gonna put a spell on you, and that kind of weaves in with a lot of the sort of panic around the Salem witch trials and witchcraft and this kind of thing. I will say that with regards to witchcraft, that's a reason why a lot of sort of teenage girls really enjoy the idea of you know, Sabrina the Teenage Witch or this kind of thing, because it's a way of having power and agency. I know that I read tons of books when I was a teenager about, you know, teenage girls who discovered they had special powers. I'm sorry to say I've not discovered any superpowers as of yet, but I will let you know the second that I discover that I have superpowers. Next I have on my list, what does that say? Oh, next I have on my list is a book called Animal, and that's by Sara Pascoe, who, if you're familiar with her, she is a comedian. I really enjoyed the book because she's very frank about reproductive rights and how she used her own reproductive rights, but I feel like she's also quite fair in that she says, I don't know, she deconstructs the debate around that very well. That's not what the whole book is about. The book is kind of an autobiographical account of her life, but she does focus on that, which I enjoyed. I think that people should be more frank about their reproductive decisions to normalize it within society. But it was a very good book, and a friend of mine also read it and enjoyed it. So, there you go. And the last thing I have on my book list is Spectacles. Yeah, Spectacles by Sue Perkins. I have a deep and unending love for Sue Perkins, so she can basically do no wrong. She can basically do no wrong as far as I'm concerned. Well, that's not true. She probably could. But I super love Sue Perkins, and I really loved the book as well. I know that she's got more recent stuff out, but that's the one that I can think of. I was super mega jealous because I had bought the book, and then I went into like a Foyles in London with a friend of mine, and she picked up a copy and bought it, and then realized that it was a signed copy. I was just filled with raging jealousy. It's fine. I'm over it. So that's what I have on my list for sort of Netflix and knit. Also audiobooks and knit or crochet, because we're not going to leave that out, right? If you have suggestions that you think people should listen to, then do drop them into the comments. If you disagree with me about my favorite Black Mirror episodes, then feel free to argue with me in the comments, but please don't be mean, because I'm a sensitive, fragile butterfly. If you also have an unending love for Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, or Sue Perkins, then you can share that with me as well. As always, please do like and subscribe, drop me a comment, etc., etc. Help me beat the YouTube algorithm bots. And that's it for this week. Next week, I will hopefully be doing an additional post about something exciting. We'll see. As always, check the show notes for links to things. I will drop links to the books on Amazon if you want to have a look. And yeah, all right. Thanks everyone. I hope you have a wonderful week and or morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time zone you happen to be in, and whenever you happen to be watching this. All right. Farewell.